Hey everyone, I'll cut to the chase. No fancy intros or anything. This is a video on me discussing security nexus in Kate as an archetype. I'm not gonna do any boring PowerPoint slides or anything, so I'm just gonna have a game against Mushin Christian of the Great Blue Sun running in the background while I talk about Nexus Kate. You can enjoy the game, or you can listen to me talk about Nexus Kate, or you can do both. Yeah, I don't really plan to commentate this game because it's kind of grindy. So let's get down to Nexus Kate. Nexus Kate is an archetype that was born around when Security Nexus came out in roughly in Data and Destiny, and with the most wanted list hitting stores and tournaments everywhere, the archetype has only gotten stronger because one of the most powerful things you could do as Shaper is to import the Anarch tools, Status Sucker, and Parasite so that you can have your share of ice destruction while still maintaining very efficient breakers in the form of Mimic, Lady, Cyber. You can't do that anymore. Now, Ichis are a pain, Assassins are a pain, a lot of ice cause trouble for Shapers, and this is why they're gradually on the fall. That being said, Security Nexus is a neat way to address these problems. And it seems like, sadly, it is played better out of faction than within, which is Sunny. Sunny has a very big problem in that her breakers already cost so much to play. 3, 4, and 5 for the Fractal, Decoder, and Killer respectively, that is too much. Add the 8 cost console on top of it and you have a very, very slow runner which just completely folds to any fast deck. But Kate solves a lot of those problems. Firstly, the 8 install cost of the Nexus is much lower. With Kate's discount, it's now 7. And if you run modded like I do in this deck, I managed to bring out the Nexus at a very early juncture for 4 credits. Not too bad, huh? So, yeah, being able to play a Nexus for 4 credits is pretty good. Not to mention that you have other hijigs in faction if you so choose to use them. You have Personal Workshop into Stim Hack, which only costs 1 influence for the Stim Hack. You have Eureka, which can bring your Nexus from your R&D, from your stack onto the board if you know that it's the top card. So there are lots of options in Shaper. And this is why Nexus is kind of better, because it's cheaper to play, and you can still maintain remote threats because you run SMC and Breaker. So if they try to rush behind remotes, fear not, your SMC will get you in. Whereas with Sunny, that's not the case. Another good reason is that Shaper has very good sources of link. In Sunny, all you have is Security Nexus and your ID, which is nice. 3 link is nice, but you want more because Nexus starts off as a Trace 5. So you turn to Shaper, which has the most link cards of any faction. Rabbit Hole is most notable. Rabbit Hole gives you 3 link for 1 click. You can't beat that. You really can't. So I'm running 3 link in this Nexus Kate deck as well, and as with most Nexus Kate decks, 3 link is pretty standard. Plus 1 from the console, plus 1 from your ID. That's 5 link. You can trace through for free every single time. And as I finally draw my Rabbit Hole in this game, you'll see that I'll install it very soon, and that blanks the Assassin on HQ. That's something I must say, a very, very neat side effect. You blank a lot of ice that otherwise causes a lot of trouble for Shapers. Tracers tend to be sentries, and Shapers are weakest against sentries. So this shows up Shaper's weakness nicely. Another reason why it fits so perfectly in Shaper. You think of your Tracer Ice, Vikram 1.0, Assassin. Those are strength 5 sentries that you just cannot break with Mimic. You could either import David for that, which kind of works, but doesn't work against lower strength ice like Ichi 1.0 or Newshound. Or you could just use Nexus and solve all your problems. Nexus allows you to bypass those pesky strength 4 sentries while allowing you to completely trace through strength 5 tracers with rabbit holes. And that is the beauty of the Nexus rabbit hole combo. Another nice effect, it also defends you against Archangels. Archangels are not too difficult for Shapers to deal with. You have Cypher, so strength 6 and Code Gates, big deal. Problem is, for a 4 res ice, taxing 3 credits out of the runner every single run is not a good deal for the runner. Archangels become very taxing too quickly. So Nexus solves that. Or rather, the Rabbit Hole solved that. Because even though Archangels are Trace 6, you have 5 base link. And if they don't have the money to pump the strength, you are going to get through Archangel for 1 credit every single time. That is a bloody good deal. Another useful side effect of Tracers is or rather Link, is that you definitely avoid traces. Some of the most notable traces are mid-seasons and seesaws. Having rabbit holes out helps protect you that much more against those traces, and especially against tech storm decks. Shapers are arguably weakest against tech storm decks like Sync, Butcher Shop Sync, or any sort of psychographic sync, because their ice is so annoying. Data Ravens, Gutenbergs, Turnpikes, all very taxing, and once they hit a seesaws into close accounts or something, your game is kind of over as you struggle to make credit after credit. They can easily drain you. With Rabbit Hole, you just completely blank all the ice. Resistor means nothing. Gutenberg, Turntable, Data Raven, Archangel, all the good ambient ice suddenly don't even require programs to break. You just waltz your way through with Link. So good. Well, what else is Link good for? Also good for avoiding flatline. Again, seesaws mid-seasons. And in this game, if you have been noticing, punitive Counter-Strike is a problem. My opponent's playing 3 and 4 pointers, Vanity Projects, Hades, Fragment, and being able to avoid punitive Counter-Strikes is nice. Although in this deck, I also run Film Critic, more for the Jinteki matchup, because I don't run Political Operative. I run Film Critic instead for easy future perfects, and here I steal the Vanity Project. I'm supposed to host it on the Film Critic, but I forget. So I'm going to just let my opponent win the game off the punitive Counter-Strikes, but turns out he told me after that he didn't see a way to win because I had too much Link. He would begin his turn with 22 credits, but he needed 26 credits in order to have 2 successful punitive Counter-Strikes. If he had 3 Counter-Strikes, things might have changed, but given that I have 5 Link, he needed 26 credits instead of 16 if I had 0 Link. So yeah, the rabbit hole just changes a lot. Yeah, so Link is just not too bad right now. A lot of corps are playing Assassin nowadays anyways, which is always just a good reason in itself to get rabbit holes up. The only problem is it worth the deck slots, and can you find it in a good time? It is 5 to install with Cape, which is still not very good. It is quite a down payment, especially when Kate's economy isn't that good, and you still need to threaten all sorts of other programs anyway. So this is why Security Kate Nexus didn't really take off in my local meta. I never really saw it even though it was very prevalent online and people in America were just saying, "Ooh, this is the thing. We are bringing it to store champs and everything." Never really saw it here, and with good reason. NEH just crushes it flat, like fast probiotics, pretty fast. Sure, you have Clot, but yeah, you won't be able to get your Nexus combo up in a timely fashion, and that is a problem. When you're playing modded Nexus Kate, it is somewhat slow. Unfortunately, there are so many things you want to mod in. The R&D interfaces, the ladies. Do you really want to spend that modded on a Nexus and go down all the way to 0 credits? It's quite tough. It really is. And not to mention that it is rather constrained on deck slots, because you're spending a lot of cards on programs, Nexus, and the 3 rabbit holes. That's influence and deck slots, mind you. So not much space for hijinks. There's no influence for legwork. There's no deck space for more money and card draw, most importantly. So in this deck I'm running hyperdrivers because hyperdrivers are just so good. I think all shapers need hyperdriver in some way, shape, or form if they want to keep up with the corps today. There's just too many fast corps out there to justify not running hyperdriver, because it just accelerates your early game by so much, and hyperdriver works so incredibly well with professional contacts. You saw how I was able to just proco all the way with my hyperdrivers earlier on in this game. And yes, that's quite important. Even in the mid game, one of the big benefits of running Nexus Kate is that my program rig isn't all that big. As you see now, in effect, I only have 2 out of my 5 memory used up because the 2 ladies are exhausted. So if I have hyperdrive in my hand now, I could theoretically install it and get 7 clicks next turn. I wouldn't have to worry about trashing programs. You can't do that with even traditional prepaid Kate. Now, another big downside of running Nexus Kate instead of standard Kate is that you lose your console slot. So with Nexus, you lose the Astrolabe, and that is actually a huge downside. Firstly, Nexus, being 8 to install instead of 1 means that you get your extra memory later. Because while Astrolabe is an instant install whenever you draw it, Security Nexus, not so much. You have to wait for a good time to install it. You don't want to give your opponent a scoring window because it went down to 0 credits. And that means you are in a lot of trouble, as I am in this game, because after a couple of multiple R&D digs, I realized that all the agendas are in his hand, which is not too unlikely given that he has a 7 card hand size and he's running lots of big agendas. So R&D was out of the question. I had to hammer HQ. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Kate can be in a lot of trouble if she doesn't install her console early, because when you're using the hyper-efficient hyperdrivers, you need the 5 memory. Ideally, usually you have an SMC on the board, and this is where you really need the 5 memory so that you can threaten both SMC and hyperdriver on the same board. So Astrolabe allows you to do that very easily, Nexus a lot less so, and especially if you don't see your Nexus early, which is another big problem. With Astrolabe, you can run 3 copies of it if you want to in response to the asset spam meta. With Nexus, you can only run 2 copies due to influence restrictions. Finally, as I was talking about the asset spam meta, that is one big reason to run Astrolabe. Because there's so much asset spam, if you're running Shaper, you have to run Astrolabe, and this doesn't do that. So that's a big downside. You're losing a lot of free card draw that you so desperately need against those very annoying asset spam decks, because they will just snowball out of control with their tempo, and you cannot challenge the assets because this deck doesn't generate a lot of money. You are relying on complete efficiency and value with the Security Nexus and your Cyber Ciphers and your ladies. So once the opponent gets the econ advantage over you, as my opponent Corp is doing this game, it becomes a lot harder to use Security Nexus. If you're poorer than the Corp, they can keep you out of their servers by out-tracing you on the Nexus. Sure, it's their loss because they're losing a whole bunch of money, but on a very key run, they could easily do that. I think this is an example of my opponent doing it right here. I'm trying to trace through the Hive, and I failed to do so. I couldn't break it with Lady because I had no tokens left, so I attempted to trace through, unsuccessful, I bounced out, and I didn't get to play the Capri side game. So when you're poor and the Corp is rich, they can abuse you like this, and it becomes very ugly. And Asset Spam can do that easily, because after the mid game, they'll have way more money than you with diversified portfolio, and you can't trash your assets. This deck runs no scrubbers. There's just no deck space, no influence. So yeah, that is another big weakness of Nexus Kate, the inability to challenge remote asset spam. And that is a big reason why you won't see much Nexus Kate around nowadays. But it still does pretty well against a variety of decks. In particular, I managed to completely suffocate an Argus Supermodernism deck in the game prior to this. So I managed to assemble the amazing combo of Netrunner City Hall and Film Critic, which allowed me to face check snares on turn click 4 safely. I'll still take the 3 net damage, but I'm not getting tagged, and any agendas I steal will go on Film Critic, which means Netrunner City Hall will never be binned, and I get to avoid the Argus ID completely, almost like an employee strike on steroids. Claude allowed me to completely prevent my opponent from scoring hostile takeovers, which meant that my opponent couldn't rest archers. Nexus Kate can be very oppressive against the right opponents, but against certain matchups, it is just completely floundering. Against Fast Robotics, you really struggle to get your rig set up. Just like Sunny, it is too expensive for fast decks. And against very slow decks like this, they can just grind your ladies out. Grind you out on econ as well, because Blue Sun's econ is pretty insane. It's not something that this deck can really challenge. And when the Caprice and Chrysium get on HQ, you know you're pretty done. At this point, I only had one run to make. Sure, I'm not going to get the remote because he has a Chrysium grid, so I would have to make a double run, which is impossible. But my goal here was to hit HQ, get the one single access on HQ, and probably win, because all the rest of his agendas are in hand. So I went for the final agenda, final push. I could only make this one run because I was just one lady counter short of making 2 runs. I had to trace through the wormhole because otherwise I wouldn't have enough money to play 2 side games. So Hive, final piece of ice, we bid. and I failed, so I lost this game. If I actually won the Capri side game at any point during this game, I probably would have won because he was agenda flooded. So what do you think about Nexus Kate? Have you seen much of it? Do you think she's good right now? I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions, and maybe we can get a discussion going. Meanwhile, thanks for watching and happy net running as usual. Goodbye.